The nurse practitioner interviewed Dr. Loretta Ford regarding her life and illustrious career. Here's our interview with the esteemed nurse educator and co-founder of the First Nurse Practitioner Program.
What would you do differently in your career, if anything, if you had one do-over? Is there anything that you remember that you would change about, any sort of instance or occurrence or something that you wanted to do or maybe you didn't?
I think for the social times and my personal situation, it worked out. I wanted to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
No, that wasn't possible. So I ended up nursing because you only had three choices anyway: teaching, nursing, or the convent. Went into nursing because it was possible at the time. Diploma school. So, and I found that I liked it. I liked working with people. I liked the caring, compassion kind of thing. I also liked the fact that I was grateful for my own situation. I couldn't be dissatisfied with it when, in taking care of patients, I realized what stresses they were under, and
Sure.
also an appreciation for their strength in dealing with it. So it worked out fine, and of course, eventually, I ended up teaching anyway. But I'm really very happy that I didn't choose public school teaching or just teaching as a career itself.
Right.
Because my background was rich. I had many options when you think about it through the years. So the expansion of the opportunities was phenomenally great compared to what I would have been teaching.
Sure.
And even when it was teaching nursing, and those opportunities were endless. I can't say that I was dissatisfied. I think I could have done it much more efficiently had I the resources and knowledge to do it. But experience is a great thing. You can have 20 years of experience one time, or you can actually have 20 years of real experience. And so if you want to learn, it's a good way. But sometimes a hard way.
What haven't you done that is still on your bucket list?
There were two places I thought I'd like to go, but I've changed my mind. But one was Israel,
Okay.
and the other was Greece, because every place else I went, I had some very wonderful international experiences over time. But I could do it now, but international travel is. Just national travel is a pain in the butt. I've given up international travel.
Okay.
There is, I think, one thing in terms of my educational background that I wish I had earlier, and quite a bit earlier, and that's math and science. It was so heavily behavioral and social science that I think in some ways I neglected it. So I do some online learning, and I'm still going to take Economics 101 one of these days. But other than that, I'm pretty well satisfied. When I didn't learn it in courses and stuff, I learned the hard way in experience. So.
Sure. You are quite an accomplished lady, if I may say so myself. So.
Well, thank you. If you live this long, you've got to do something with your life.
What would you tell a 5-year-old who says, I want to be a nurse? And the second part is, what would you tell an 18-year-old who says, I want to be a nurse?
Well, you get into career counseling with the strategies there. But I think I would approach it from the viewpoint of trying to look at their background and ask them why they think they want to be a nurse or whatever they want to be. And if they had some models or whatever, so that I would understand more what their education was and what they thought nursing was, vis-a-vis what it might be, and what they think they would need to accomplish their current goals. I would have to admit that I would be biased in terms of if the inclination is there and the personality and experience they've had so far
Sure.
lends it to that. But also to think about it as the opportunities for other things they might want to do, whether it was foreign travel, whether it was to continue some of the things they're learning in terms of advanced education. I would want them to know that half of what they learn is not going to be valid in maybe 5 or 10 years, so they'd have to be prepared for a life of learning, knowing that there may be even 7 options in their career. That, first of all, I believe in a basic, good, liberal education for all professionals. And in that sense, with a good smattering of math and science. And from there, they can make many choices, and not necessarily make a choice for life, but for that period. So, you see that in the second career people today. They get into something and it's not fulfilling particular situation, or they have to feel some satisfaction and accomplishment and productivity and usefulness. Have a social mission. Do they have a social mission? Do they have is there a personal mission? Is it fulfilling somebody else's dream for them? So I try to get people to think big and dream big, and then be satisfied with what they're doing at the time and do the best they can. And then if that's for them, that's fine. But if not, make the hard choice sometimes of change. It's not easy to change. It's hard for yourself, but it's even harder to change institutions.
What's the most memorable moment or moments from your career?
I think the most memorable part of that was when the first group of students found themselves and had a level of competence and confidence and self-esteem. And also to recognize that they already had many of the attributes and even the skills that they hadn't been using that they learned years ago. We learned a lot in anatomy and physiology, for example, that we never used in the way that we were teaching nurse practitioners. And so it was sort of like breaking an eggshell. All of a sudden it burst out. They were so enthusiastic and energized and committed to nursing incompetence and the willingness to take the risk and also to advance it. And I think that was one of the most insightful experiences I had, and which encouraged me to stand all the bullying of the early years from other faculty and even the profession itself. Because I wasn't the most popular kid on the block, I can tell you.
What can you tell us about Dr. Henry Silver and what he meant to you?
Well, Henry Silver was a wonderful partner. First of all, he was a superb clinical teacher. And I learned a lot in teaching strategies from him in terms of the clinical ways and the application of some of the decisions that had to be made. Because even though we, in nursing, the nursing process started with assessment, because I insisted that nursing had all the productive elements, but they needed to be embroidered, so to speak, and then authorized for accountability through education. So Henry Silver was a tremendously talented clinical teacher. We were partners because what I brought to the partnership was, first of all, a knowledge of nursing and the politics of nursing and the public health nursing aspect and the public health. what he brought, of course, was the tremendous body of knowledge that in growth and development of children, and he didn't know as much about nursing, of course, when he started that. So he was very accepting of nurses, and he liked to teach nursing students, and so he had a great deal of respect for them, and they for him. He also was challenging, and not in a negative way, but in a case study kind of thing. What would you do about this and that? The other thing is that he was a colleague. He was a deputy chairman of the pediatrics department, which was chaired by Henry Kemp. Now, Henry Kemp was a very famous pediatrician who was known for identifying the battered child syndrome. He was also part of the group that started the eradication of smallpox around the world. So he was a famous guy, but he was also a very sharp tactician in terms of change. And I think his influence on us, for example, even though we had small amounts of data, which was anecdotal, he encouraged us and encouraged Henry and I to get into the literature to describe it, because there was so much controversy about it. And so we started very early on the transparency of what we were doing and what we were experiencing. And we published in nursing journals and medical journals. So that business of transparency combined with communication quickly put the public at notice and the professions at notice of what we were doing. And that became, that was a very important kind of strategy. So the transparency and communication, and also not only communication with the professions and the public, but also with the boards. We went to the boards of medicine and the boards of nursing. And I was the chairman of the board of nursing, but I recused myself from that and stepped down to do the presentation. And our approach was, this is nursing. This is the assessment part of the nursing process. And we were starting on assessment and then coming to clinical decision-making, which was part of nursing. And we used the information that was basically nursing with some enhancement of both the knowledge base and the technical skills, and frankly, the confidence that this brought to them in terms of making decisions. Now, in public health nursing, and these are mostly public health nurses to start with, we were, in many instances, that I mind in Colorado and in the rural areas and the mountain areas, and in New Jersey in the ghettos, we were making decisions, sometimes surreptitiously, but we didn't feel authorized in terms of doing it, but we pretty much, developed a language that if we needed some referrals, we could refer without diagnosing. But we were better at diagnosing some of the communicable diseases in schools than, some of the general physicians. They didn't see those early stages. Anyway, in the long run, these kind of strategies, and my partner Henry and I used to. There's another thing, and that, of course, is the power of medicine. The fact that they not only had the power with Henry Kemp's help, physicians at the medical center who were much more accepting than the nursing faculty. And so you can't deny the power of medicine in terms of making changes. And the respect that the other physicians in the medical center had for both Henry Kemp and Henry Silva. So that, and there were the other thing is that nationally, there were other teams of nurses and physicians who were working on similar kinds of efforts in terms of preparing nurses to take on these roles. There was some pediatrics up in Boston, and then the adult, that was a little later, but the adults at the University of Missouri. So that there was perturbations for this kind of thing going on. There's one at Montefiore in New York. And some were different. Some were in chronic disease. Essentially, there was some activity in the nation. Now, not so much in the West, as I recall, except for Missouri, mostly on the East Coast. But Henry was a wonderful partner. He, as I say, got along well with the students, and he was able to learn more about nursing and teaching nursing. And he, of course, knew what nurses were doing in practice, but he could see where they could be much more skilled in terms of using those.
Who is or was your role model?
There were some nursing leaders in the country who, most of them were in public health that I knew, of course, or had a public health nursing background or community. Those people were like Margaret Arnstein at, I think she was at Yale then, and Mary Kelly Mullane in Chicago. So there were several nursing leaders who were encouraging. They didn't happen to be on my campus, but they were nationally. But most of them were also careful, I would say, about supporting, because there was so much. Not all nursing leaders in the country were responsive to this, and certainly the Children's Bureau wasn't at all. So when you had some resistance like that, it was pretty difficult to find out who was supporting and who not. It tended to be nursing leaders in community or public health nursing.
What are your thoughts on the NP profession, where it's been and where it's going?
I think it's going to be the advanced model of nursing, in the profession of nursing. And I think it has caused us to think more expressively in terms of all of nurses. Because when you think about it, the professional nurses who are prepared with baccalaureate have tremendous backgrounds to be responsive to patient needs in a better way. So I think it's permeated down to other nation programs, and also influence the self-persona of nurses in terms of thinking of themselves in a professional way and in a way that they can be full partners. And it's possible for them to be team leaders. It's possible for them to be autonomously responsible. It's possible for them to go into entrepreneurship in terms of recognizing a community need and building entrepreneurial organization to meet those particular community needs. And so I think the future is very bright. I think we'll have to really be sharp on several things. One is developing partnerships with other than physicians. I think bioengineers, biome people, all kinds of people prepared differently in different professions other than the health professions. And so that the emphasis is going to be on innovation, not imitation, but activation of ideas, be in a constant state of innovation and invention, and also be very knowledgeable about the changes in technology and how they might fit into it. As a matter of fact, may be the source of translational research for all kinds of researchers. And so I see big changes there. And of course, the technology is something else. And the research is going to be different. The possibilities are endless and expansive. And if you don't like what's going on, change it or try to. Stamina helps, and being so sensitive about your own risk-taking in terms of that. In the interest of patient care, I think you have to keep that in mind, what's good for the patients. And don't forget the economics of it. I think we haven't enough to demonstrate what things cost and how we might impact upon that cost and whether or not there's some timing to it. But mainly to keep in mind, calling the 4 Ps, right? Preservation of health, prevention, protection, and promotion. And if that keeps those in mind, I think that would be a useful contribution to society and to themselves.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with being pleased with what you've been able to accomplish. More important is really what other people can accomplish that have taken your ideas or have, expanded on them or even discredited them. Because some of the things that we learn, we are not useful in the future. So we have to be willing to give those up. Anyway, it's been nice talking with you.
It has been a pleasure.
This podcast does not constitute medical advice and should not be taken as such, and does not replace professional judgment or advice. The ideas and viewpoints expressed in this podcast do not reflect the official position of the speakers, authors, affiliated organizations, the Nurse Practitioner Journal, or Wolters Kluwer.